on today's video, where I'm going to walk through a Code Wars coding challenge, I'm going to show a solution, a logical solution using just words, and then I'm going to show a code solution for this problem in both JavaScript and Python. So jumping in, let's look at depth at what this problem is asking us. First of all, we see that the title is called Delete Occurrences of an element if it occurs more than n times. So given a list in a number n, create a new list that contains each number of is at most n times without reordering. For example, if n equals 2 and the input is an array of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, you take 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and drop the next 1, 2. So basically what this is saying is we're going to have a function. That function is going to receive a list of numbers. And then the second parameter in the function will be the maximum number any number can repeat inside of the list. So in this example where you have an array of 4 ones with a max of 2 occurrences, the function should return just 2 of the ones, with the last 2 being dropped, since this is the third occurrence and the fourth occurrence, and that's more than 2. So looking at another example, if we're given an array of 20, 37, 20, and 21 with a max number of occurrences of 1, then we see that the second occurrence of the number 20 is going to be dropped, and then you're left with just 20, 37, and then 21. So it's important to see that there's no reordering happening. So it's not the first 20 that's being dropped, it's only the occurrence that happens past this max that's been provided. Let's flesh this out a little bit more by first looking at one of our example inputs. So we were given this array of 20, 37, 20, and 21. We're told that the max number of occurrences for any of these numbers in this array is 1, and therefore the end result is that this new array should have the second occurrence of 20 drop, so that we only see 120, 137, and 121. So let's walk through, still using just words, of how we can leverage the logic that we've already outlined in order to see this in action. Now, taking this example array, which outputs the new array that drops any occurrences past the max number, we can look at what this might look like in words as we look through the logic for solving this problem. So we know that we want to be able to, as we loop through the original array, we want to be able to compare previous elements in the array to the current element, and we want to check how many times the current number has already occurred. So looking at this example, when it's iterating over the first index, the current number will be 20. The previous elements in the array would just be an empty array, since it's the first index of the array. And so number of occurrences is 0, which is less than the max number. And then moving on, as we iterate from the 0 index to the first index, we see that previous elements in the array is 20, the current number is 37, and the number of occurrences of 37 inside of the previous elements is 0. And then we get to this index 2, where the previous elements in the array, there's already a 20, and then there's a 37, and the current number is also 20. So number of occurrences of 20 in the previous elements of the array is 1, which is equal to the max number of occurrences. And then we can see on this third iteration, the previous elements in the array, we have 20, 37, and 20. The current number is 21, and there are no occurrences of 21 inside of the previous elements inside of the array. So what does this mean? We'll have logic inside of the code that says if the current number has appeared less than n times, then include it in the new array. So n in this example is 1. So any current number that has appeared less than n times will be included in this new array. So looking at this example, we know that the current number 20 during this first iteration, this first index 0, will be included because the number of occurrences is 0, which is less than 1. And then we know 37 will be included because 0 is less than 1. And then we know that the second 20 will be dropped because 1 is not less than 1. And then we know that 21 will be included because 0 is less than 1. And so the end result will be this array of 20, 37, 21, with the second occurrence of 20 being dropped. So next up, let's look at what this will look like in code. So we know the first thing that we wanted to do was to loop through the original array. So JavaScript has a few different methods that you can use to iterate or loop through an array. I chose reduce because we wanted to be able to create a new array. And I know that reduce is a way of being able to take an array and morph it to any other type of data that you want. In this case, I'm taking an array and I'm returning an array. But just in general, if you're curious about reduce, you can also take an array and turn it into an object, a string, a number. So I chose reduce here. So we have the new array, which I'm initializing here to be equal to an empty array to start out with. And this is where all of our elements in the array that haven't occurred more than n times are going to go into this new array. Element just represents the current element, and as JavaScript is looping over this original array, and then IDX is just standing for the current index. And then next up, we want to compare previous elements in the array to the current element. So another method that JavaScript has on arrays is called slice, and it allows you to take an array and create like a slice of it. So in the original example previously, we're looking at what the array looks like as you're iterating over each element and looking at just the previous elements inside of the array before the current element. So that's what this code is doing. It's saying start at index 0 and then go up until the current index. So the way that slice works, when you just pass an index, it's going to stop at the element that is just before the current element, because one of the confusing things about JavaScript, there's slice and then there's also splice. One starts at index 0 and the other does not. So slice doesn't start with index 0, so that's why I can just pass an index directly from 0 to the current index, and I know that the current element will not be included in this constant of array until current, which is what we want. And then I want to check how many times the current number has already occurred. So given this current sliver of the original array until current, I can go ahead and use another JavaScript method called filter in order to check that to check how many times in the previous array that this current element has appeared. So filter is going to filter out anything inside of this original array that isn't the current number, and then .length is just going to say how many elements are inside of that new array. So once we know the number of occurrences, we can then go to this logic statement of if the current number has appeared less than n times, then we want to go ahead and include it in the new array. And so then we are going to return the new array inside of this reduce method. So all of this logic happens on each element in the array. So we're able to grow this new array and capture any of the elements that meet this criteria of not occurring more than n times. And then the output of this reduce method will be the final output of the new array, and that is what this function returns. Coding solution. So again, we have the same logic steps, but of course you have different syntax. So we want to loop through So backing up, we want to still create a new list which contains only elements that have occurred n times or less. So we're going to go ahead and create this new list. And then we're going to loop through the original list like we did before when we were using JavaScript's reduce method, but now we're using Python for statement. So we're looking at every single element inside of this incoming list, and then we want to compare previous elements in the list to the current element. So we can do that by specifying the list that we want to in the cutoff. So we have the list and we have the cutoff, and the end result will be all of the previous elements up until the current index. And then we want to check how many times the current number has occurred. So Python has a handy count method, which is more straightforward than what we had to do in JavaScript, because we can pass in the list and then we can say how many the specific thing that we want to count, and then it'll go ahead and return the number of times that particular element has occurred in that particular list. And then we can go ahead and say if count is less than the max, then we want to go ahead and insert the current element into our new list, and we want to make sure we're passing in the index so that we can say where in the new list we want this element to be. And then finally we want to return the new list. So that is the Python solution. We previously went over the JavaScript solution, and we talked through the logic for how we could approach a solution for this coding challenge. And one thing to keep in mind is that the solutions that I found and laid out here are just one of an indefinite amount of ways that you can approach this problem. I would be really curious to know how you would solve this problem. Please let me know in the comments, and see you next time. Thank you.